All right, in this lesson, we're going to talk about midpoint. We'll talk about the formula and how to determine the midpoint of 2 points and also the midpoint if you have a given graph segment. So the formula for midpoint is kind of fancy looking. It has x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. All this means is that you take the x values of each coordinate and you add them together and then divide it by 2. The other side of the formula says we add the y values of each coordinate and divide by 2. So that's the formula we'll be using. All right, now midpoint by definition is a point that divides a segment into two congruent equal segments. All right, so in this example here then, if this segment has a value of 6 and a value of 22, we saw earlier that we would add them up and divide by 2. So if we add up 6 and 22 and divide by 2, that'd be 28 divided by 2, which is 14. So the midpoint here would be 14. So that value would be 8 units from 6 and 8 units from 22, because that would divide it equally into two congruent segments. All right, so that's just a basic idea of how midpoint works. Now, what happens in a problem like this? All right, so the first problem here, example 2, we're gonna do just using the formula. Then we'll do the problem again using the graph. So in this particular case, we have 8 and we have -6. So 8 and -6 would go into the formula just as the numbers are. We don't change the numbers or manipulate them. So it would be 8 minus 6, which gives us a positive 2. And then we divide by 2. So positive 2 divided by 2 would be 1. So the midpoint value of this would be a positive 1. We take 9 for the y coordinate, 3 for the y coordinate, add them together, that gives you 12. Divide by 2, which would give you 6. So the answer should be 1 comma 6. And if we see the work here, remember the first step is to look at the first value, which is 8. The first value is -6. You just put them in place as is. Don't change signs, nothing. Just leave them. Whatever the number is, bring them down. So 8 minus 6 is 2. That's where we get this number from. And then we divide by 2 because the 2 comes from the formula. So 2 divided by 2 would be 1. All right, if we look at the y values then, this 9 comes here. This 3 would come down here. We add them up, we get 12 divided by 2, which give us 6. Now, in this example, if we graph these problems here, we would have these 2 points here, and I would have a segment like so. And this would be like one of your quiz questions. So on this particular case, if you want to graph it, there's a different way to do it. Now, because we already did this with the formula, you can do a graph problem using the formula. But if you want to do a graph problem using the graph way, I'm going to show you that right now. So what we would do is draw a triangle above the segment. Okay, so we want to draw a right triangle above the segment. So what we want to do is count the length of the side. So in this case, the side is 6 units long. So half of that is 3. And we're taking half because we want the midpoint. So half would be 3. And so if we were to dash a line that way, somewhere along that line would be the midpoint. But we want to make sure we're accurate. So we want to do the same thing for the top. And so if we look here, the top is 14 units long and the halfway would be 7. And so right here would be our halfway point. And so this coordinate right here happens to be the x value of 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is the same thing we got with the formula. So that would be the way to do the graph. Draw the triangle above, take half the distance of the sides, and see where they intersect. All right, let's do 2 more examples now, just using coordinates and the formula. Most students seem to like this way more than the graph way. All right, so in this case here, the -2 and the 8 we're going to add. So -2 plus 8 is a positive 6. Divided by 2 would give us 3. So our x value midpoint should be positive 3. Positive 6 and -4 would give us a value of 2, and then divided by 2 would give us a value of 1. So if we look at the work here, again, -2 goes here, positive 8 goes here. When we add those up, we get a value of 6. Divided by 2 would give us a value of 3. All right, now over here, 6 minus 4 would go on top. We subtract, we get 2. Divided by 2 would give us a value of 1. All right, last example here. We start with -5 and -6. So -5 and a -6 gives us -11. Divided by 2 is going to be -5.5, and we'll talk about that in a second. Then we have -1 and 9, and that's going to give us 8. Divided by 2 is going to be 4. So if we look at the work again, -5 would go here, -6 would go here, divided by 2. So -5, -6 would be -11 divided by 2. Now, you could have left your answer in this problem like so, -11 halves. That would be okay. If you want to convert it to decimal, it would be -5.5. If you wanted to keep it as a mixed fraction, you could write -5 and then 1/2 as a fraction. Those would all be acceptable answers. Now the y value would be -1 and 9, which go here, and you divide by 2. So that's 8 divided by 2, and then that would equal to 4. So these questions like this will be one question of your quiz. The other question will be from the graph, where you're given a segment and you have to find the midpoint.